All right, welcome to a live episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are going live and we are going to be talking about the Saturday, March 1st main slate of college basketball DFS. We've got a nice little 10-game slate, a lot of really intriguing games, really intriguing options for building your DFS lineups. And so we're going to break down all 10 games, tell you what you can expect from each game, as well as who needs to be in or out of your DFS lineups here on this Saturday slate. Now, if you're joining us live, welcome, or we're happy to have you. Letting us be a part of your Friday night, letting us be a part of your preparation for what's going to be an awesome Saturday. Let us know in the comments what you think. Like if there's a player you want me to talk about, player you got an opinion on, let me know what you think in the comments. I'm looking forward to interacting with you guys, getting some conversation going, because this is a big time 10-game slate. And, we want to make sure we uncover every stone here. We want to make sure that we give you guys all the information what was that? Make sure we give you guys all the information you need in order to build some winning DFS lineups here on this Saturday slate. And it looks like we got a big contest on DraftKings. We have got a $5K to first $15 entry, which honestly, looking at it, is kind of a horrible contest structure, but 5K to first, you don't see that every day in college basketball. So it's kind of cool that we're getting bigger prize pools. In the words of John Rothstein, this is March. And so, now that it's March 1st, now that the calendar's officially turned into March, it's college basketball season. So I'm really much looking forward to the next month. Now, I do want to give you guys a quick update. Basically, if you've been following along with us all season long, you know that I've been coaching high school basketball. And so that schedule has kind of dictated how often I've been able to record. Getting home late some game nights, it's not exactly possible. Well, our season's officially over. Unfortunately, we lost in the first round of the state playoffs after winning our conference tournament. So I'm going to have a little more free time on my hands. So I'm pretty much going to go in the no days off mode starting in March. So I'm basically going to be on here every night or almost every night talking about college basketball, talking about the DFS slate for the next day. So if you've not already, make sure you have subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for this incredible month of March. And tomorrow we're kicking it off with something new. Underdog is trying out college basketball best ball drafts for the NCAA tournament. We're going to talk strategy for that, and we're going to do a live draft on tomorrow night's episode. So if you're subscribed, you will be there for that. If you don't know what Underdog is, you might want to try it out, especially tune in tomorrow and seeing if it might be for you. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. But first, I see we got Darren in the comments. What's up, Darren? Good to see you, my guy. Guy that I've had a lot of interaction with on Twitter this year. Darren, always tuning into the DFS shows, always having some good thoughts. So happy to have you here in the live chat, Darren. All right, so let's go ahead now and dive into the 10-game slate. So the first game up on the slate is going to be, in my opinion, a pretty interesting one. We've got Maryland taking on Penn State. And normally Maryland doesn't exactly play in a whole lot of juicy matchups, but this one is, because Penn State's one of the teams in the Big Ten that you definitely want to be targeting. KenPom has this game projected to finish 81-75 in favor of Maryland. That is a 156-point game total, which is one of the highest on the slate. And a big reason why is because both these teams are going to play with outstanding tempo. Maryland ranks 54th in the nation in tempo and 16th in defensive efficiency. Penn State ranks 59th in the nation in tempo and 90th in defensive efficiency. Penn State is also not a great defensive team in terms of field goals. They force a lot of turnovers, which helps their efficiency, but they're 258th in effective field goal percentage defensively, and they give up a high assist rate. So this is a team in Penn State that surrenders a lot of points and a lot of fantasy points. So I definitely think you're going to want to be getting some exposure to some Maryland guys. And why not start off with, their two bigs, Derek Queen and Julian Reese. I've pretty much been on the record all season long for saying that I love playing both of them, but not at the same time, because more often than not, one of them is going to be going off. And I really do think that in this matchup against Penn State, one of them's going to go off. Derek Queen had kind of a floor game against Michigan State on Wednesday, and he still put up a double-double, still put up 26 DraftKings points. So I definitely think he's going to be in line for more than that. I think that no matter how Penn State tries to guard it, no matter who they try to guard with Niederhauser and Hicks, I don't think they're going to be able to match up well at all. So I do think that this is a really good spot for Derek Queen. He kind of plays more of the 4 than the 5, but either way, I think it's a good spot for him. And I think it's a good spot for Julian Reese as well. If you're playing GPPs, Julian Reese probably needs to be a part of your player pool. He's just a super volatile player. He can get himself in foul trouble quite often, but when he stays out of foul trouble, when he plays a lot of minutes, he very often turns in ceiling performances. And like I said, in this game against Penn State, I think that it very well could be a ceiling performance for either Queen or Reese. Now, The one bad part about playing Penn State is the fact that they have a really good on-ball defender in Ace Baldwin. So I don't really think that this is going to be a great Jacoby Gillespie game. Gillespie's a little on the shorter side. I could very much see him struggling with the on-ball defense of Ace Baldwin if that is how Penn State tries to match it up. And if that's the case, I really think it could be a Selton Miguel game. Selton Miguel is a guy that we saw run point a lot when he was at South Florida. He's a guy that we saw handle the ball a lot, be kind of the lead offensive player for long stretches of time for that team. And so I think he could absolutely do that here in this one. He had been great up until the Michigan State game. In that Michigan State game, I don't know if anybody was watching it, but he was in foul trouble early, never really got into a rhythm, only took 6 shots in that game, missed all 3 of his threes, which is uncharacteristic for him. And so really just, that Michigan State game is kind of like the what's the word I'm looking here for? The black sheep on his game log, right? But I'm kind of willing to go back to him and definitely think that if you, like me, think that Baldwin is going to guard Gillespie, I think that Miguel could be in it for a really good bounce back spot against Penn State. And if not Miguel, then Rodney Rice. Rodney Rice is kind of more of a 3-and-D guy than Miguel is, whereas Miguel can be a little bit more of a facilitator. But Rice has still got some good games in his game log as well, over 27 DraftKings points in the last 3. And the great news is with Maryland is they pretty much play their starting 5 the entire game if they stay out of foul trouble. So I'm really not considering anybody outside that starting 5 on this Maryland side. But with them having an 81-point implied total, with Penn State being a soft matchup, I'm definitely going to be getting some Terps into my lineups tomorrow. Now, on the Penn State side, Maryland is not a good matchup. So I'm not really rushing to play them, but they've got some guys that I think are playable. Ace Baldwin Jr., I think he's playable anytime he's on a slate because he plays with such a high usage rate. He plays nearly every minute of the game, and he can get you 6 steals quite easily. Like, he's had 6 steals in 3 of the last 4 games, which is an insane stat. He averages about 2.5 steals a game. So I don't think it's the best matchup in the world, but I'm kind of willing to go back to Baldwin, especially if you're looking for like a game stack. If you play 2 of the Maryland guys, you can play Baldwin as a run back and just hope that this game takes off, because I think that there's going to be another game that people are going to be stacking. So it would be a little bit contrarian to stack up this one. I also really like Freddie DeLeon in this game. Penn State's another team that if their starters stay out of foul trouble, they're going to play their starting lineup pretty much the entire game. And right now, DeLeon's playing over 30 minutes a game. He's played over 31 in the last 3. He's getting a decent amount of shots, over 8 shots in the last 3. And that's turned into fantasy points. He's not the biggest peripheral stat guy in the world, but if he's knocking down his shots, if he's getting opportunities, and he's out there on the floor for the entire game, DeLeon at $4,500 is a guy that is certainly going to make my player pool on a slate where there's not a whole lot of obvious value plays. All right, let's go ahead and move on to game number 2. All right, this one is going to be interesting. We got Miami taking on North Carolina. KenPom has this one projected to be 92-75 in favor of the Tar Heels. That is a 167-point game total, which is tied for the highest on the slate. And North Carolina, with that 92-point team total on KenPom, that is the highest on the slate by quite a substantial margin. And that's because Miami is just such a good matchup, right? Miami ranks 175th in the nation in tempo, but 332nd in defensive efficiency. I don't think you guys might not realize how difficult that is to do for a power conference team when you have all these mid-majors and small majors out there that are just so bad defensively, and Miami's in the bottom 30. Like, that's insane. They're outside the top 300 in both defensive 2-point field goal percentage and defensive 3-point field goal percentage. So it's just insane how bad this team is defensively. You got to think that Carolina is going to have a field day. And oh, by the way, North Carolina, they rank 29th in the nation in tempo. They like to get up and down. 77th in defensive efficiency, not great. And UNC ranks outside the top 300 in turnovers forced. So for this Miami team, with Carolina playing at a fast tempo and Carolina not forcing a lot of turnovers, they're going to get a lot of shots up. It's just a matter of whether or not they make them. And, if you want to play a few Miami guys, I think you could do that. A few of the Miami guys actually ended up being decent value against Duke, and Carolina is a much juicier matchup than Duke was. Duke is like one of the worst matchups in all college basketball. Carolina is far from that. Now, the big revolving news with Miami, though, is on guard Matthew Cleveland, whether or not he ends up playing in this game. He hasn't played in the last 2. I can't find any updates on him. there might be people out there who are more plugged in than me, but I can't find anything. I'm under the assumption he's not going to play, though, given that they kind of already held out Nigel Pack for the rest of the year. I don't see any reason why Cleveland would go out there, kind of with a lame duck program that's not going to qualify for the ACC tournament and risk injury. So I kind of think he's going to be out for this game. And if he is, what that has done is that has really condensed the shot attempts and usage and minutes around much fewer Miami players, and it's made them viable in DFS, right? The big beneficiary has been AJ Stat McRae. He's moved into the starting lineup in the last 2 games, 31 DraftKings points against Virginia Tech, 19 against Duke. But like I said, Duke's a tough matchup. North Carolina is not. So if Cleveland remains out, AJ Stat McRae is probably going to make my player pool, as well as Lynn Kidd. So North Carolina all season has kind of been bullied down low by big men, and Lynn Kidd would be the guy for Miami who would be able to do that. Last game against Duke, he took 14 shots, only put up 20 total DraftKings points, but 14 shots, like against Carolina, if you do that, you're probably going to put up more DraftKings points. So I'm kind of here for Lynn Kidd at 7,500 as well. Brandon Johnson is their other big at 5,300. I could see him having a big game, but I would rather play Lynn Kidd. Just looking at the metrics between the two of them, Kidd has a lot better rates, and with his size, I think is a much better matchup against North Carolina. And then the guards, or kind of the wings, I guess, for this Miami team. You got Divine Ugochukwu, which I'm pretty certain is the intro to the song Hooked on a Feeling by Blue Swede. Ugochukwu was great last game against Duke. Only took 4 shots, but he put up 25 DraftKings points. That's a pretty incredible stat line for a guy who is only $4,500. I'm definitely going to be playing a little bit of him if Cleveland remains out. Like, I just think that this matchup with North Carolina is so juicy that if you just happen to, catch lightning in a bottle, you could get some of these guys that really put up good value from a DraftKings perspective. All right, now we got to talk about the North Carolina side. So Darren kind of hit the nail on the head in the comments. He's 100% right. He says, wish I could play last season's version of RJ Davis. Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that this Carolina rotation right now is making them really annoying to target. So even though they have like the dreamiest matchup on paper, even though they're projected to score 92 points, their rotation is making them tougher to target in DraftKings. So let's start off with the head of the snake, RJ Davis. So Davis is still playing all of the minutes. He's still taking a decent amount of shots, but he hasn't been anywhere nearly as effective as he was last season. He's not hitting the same rebounding and assist numbers that he was last season. So his DraftKings scoring is just generally down. You look at the last 5 games, he's had 3 of them that are over 33 DraftKings points, only one of them that's over 36, and that was 38. And so really it's kind of hard to argue to play him at $8,900, except for the fact that the matchup is just incredibly juicy. So if, RJ Davis, kind of turns back time and goes back to last year's RJ Davis, he could absolutely smash this game. But if he continues to play how he's been playing, then it's tough to argue for playing him at $8,900. It just is. Now, like I was saying, the rotation is making this team super frustrating because basically before the Duke game, they were playing like super small ball, 4 guards all the time, small rotation. It was easy to know who was going to play, right? They're kind of going away from that, and they're playing bigger and bigger lineups. And so what you see recently is that the minutes for Seth Trimble and Elliot Cadeau have been way down. Normally, I love Elliot Cadeau in games where Carolina is projected to score a lot of points because he has a ton of peripheral stats, ton of rebounds, ton of assists upside, but he's not playing enough minutes to really take advantage of that upside. And so it's really frustrating to try to play those 2 guys because they're just playing bigger and bigger lineups. A lot of minutes have gone to Drake Powell, but he's a cardio king. He plays a ton of minutes, doesn't take a ton of shots, not a high usage player. You could make the argument for him having a high floor at $4,600, but it doesn't really intrigue me a whole lot. And so what's happening is you're seeing more and more minutes from not only Powell, but Withers and Lubin as well. They're the starting front court now. But even then, they're not super high usage players. They're not super efficient players. And it's kind of been like outlier games from them when those 2 guys have gone off. So the question is, do they continue to kind of play this big lineup? Because if it's going to be the big lineup, then you got to feel like Withers, Lubin, and Powell, have got to be in play. But like even then, if they play a lot of minutes, they're not super high usage players. It's just a super frustrating situation to target. But with them having a 92-point total, if you're playing a lot of lineups, I think you have to get exposure to some of these Carolina guys, and it's just a matter of picking which ones. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to game number 3, which is Clemson taking on Virginia. And not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one because this is one of the ugliest games of the slate. KenPom has this one projected to be 69-62 in favor of Clemson. That is a game total of 131 points. In terms of the stats, Clemson ranks 343rd in tempo and 28th in defensive efficiency. So slow tempo plus good defense equals terrible matchup for Virginia. And oh, by the way, Clemson is a very good shooting team, and they really have no weaknesses on the defensive side of the ball. Virginia ranks 360th in tempo and 141st in defensive efficiency. And they play with a really high assist rate, but they don't get offensive rebounds. So this is just not a great situation to target from DraftKings scoring, given that we've got two teams outside the top 40 in tempo. We've got one really good defensive team. We got another team that doesn't really put up a lot of DraftKings points. You might just totally cross this one off. But playing devil's advocate, there's a few guys on each side that I think you can make the argument to play. Clemson, if the game remains close, is going to be very starting five heavy, which starts with their pair of big men, Ian Shefflin and Victor Lacken. And generally, one of them goes off per game. Generally speaking, Locken doesn't even play a whole lot of minutes, but he has the potential to go off just because he's such a supremely high usage player when he's out there. He can get you blocks, he can get you steals, he can get you rebounds very quickly. So I was actually at the Wake Forest Virginia game Wednesday night, went with a good friend of mine who's a Wake Forest fan. He had an open ticket, so he brought me along with him. And really, Wake Forest, who's not a big post-up team, really looked to post up against Virginia. They really felt like they had an advantage against Blake Buchanan and Jacob Kofi down low. So Clemson might feel the same exact way. And if that's the case, you can expect a lot of post touches from Shefflin and Locken, and really you can expect a lot of DraftKings points from them. I think that you could make an argument that they're solid GPP plays because nobody is going to end up playing them. And if the matchup is that juicy, then they could end up putting up a lot of points. The lead guards for Clemson are Zachary and Chase Hunter, but like I said, I don't think this is the matchup you really want to play the Clemson guards. I'd rather just kind of stick it with Shefflin and Lacken and go from there. Now, on the Virginia side, Isaac McNeely absolutely went off against Wake Forest. It felt like he could not miss, and he really didn't. 10 for 14 from the field, 43 DraftKings points. But that's kind of an outlier performance. I'm probably not going to get him into my lineups. Yeah, he's playing really well. He played really well against Wake, but I just don't see him doing that again. He made a lot of really tough shots, like contested shots. And so I just don't really feel the need to play him at max price at $8,200 in this matchup against Clemson, who's an elite defensive team that plays at a slow tempo. Now, what was also interesting was Day-Day Ames had a pretty solid game against Wake Forest as well, 25 DraftKings points. And he did it from not really like an elite shooting performance, but he can get you some peripheral stats. He can get you rebounds, assists, and steals in a hurry. Normally we like peripheral stat guys in up-tempo games, but Ames, I don't know, $5,100 given how he's played lately, that seems very reasonable to me. Now, the guy we got to talk about, we already mentioned how Wake really looked to target Buchanan and Kofi down low. Those two guys are like foul magnets offensively. All they do is set screens. Not really guys I like targeting. I do like Elijah Saunders, though. And Darren's kind of hitting it on the comments. So Saunders, is recovering from an injury, right? And in the Wake Forest game, to me, from somebody who was sitting watching the game very close to the Virginia bench, he did not look like he was still hurt. He got in foul trouble because he got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time against Trayvon Spillers a few times. So he only played 26 minutes. But while he was out there, he looked effective to me. He looked 100%. The usage rate was back closer to where it was before injury. And so 4,200 Elijah Saunders, if he can stay out of foul trouble, I really do like the price tag for him. But what worries me is the fact that, if he had to foul against Trayvon Spillers of Wake Forest, how's he going to guard Shefflin and Locken without fouling? But I think he's a viable GPP play at $4,200. We've seen him play significantly better than this before the injury. And like I said, just from the eye test, I think he is now back from that injury. And I think that he would have played more minutes against Wake Forest if he was not in foul trouble. So I'm absolutely willing to put Saunders in my player pool here on this slate. All right, y'all. So that is 3 games down, right? So we're about a third away with our breakdown. If you're watching live, let us know in the comments what you think. We're getting closer to the NCAA tournament. And so to me, it's just a great time to be playing college basketball DFS. Very happy to have you guys watching live. I do want to mention, if you do want more information from me, there are places where you can get it. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm more than happy to answer any questions if you ask me on Twitter. I'm also tweeting out all updates for the show. And if there's ever a night where I don't have a show, I'm tweeting out some data and some opinions as well. So follow me on Twitter if you have not already. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. I cannot recommend this enough, y'all. This Discord is a community of a bunch of really smart, really good people who play a lot of different sports DFS. College basketball is one of them. The chat in there is jumping on a daily basis. There's a lot of people that are on top of injury news, on top of like lineup news, and just, we're in general talking about plays, talking about strategy all day long. It's a great place to be if you're just looking for people to bounce ideas off of, or if you're looking for people to just sweat it out together. I cannot recommend it enough. If you have not joined that Discord, it is 100% free. And if you do want to know who makes my final DFS lineups, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. I tweet out my core plays as well as why they're my core plays for every single college basketball DFS slate. So if you want access to that, head on over to the Patreon. All right, so like I said, 3 games down. We got 7 to go. I'm going to take a quick little swig of my Gatorade here. Gatorade, if you're watching this, you can sponsor me. I love your product. All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about game number 4, UConn taking on Providence. KenPom has this one projected to be 75-73 in favor of UConn. That's a lot closer spread than I thought it was going to be, just given what the general public perception of these two teams is. And that's a 148-point game total. That's interesting because the profile of these two teams doesn't really indicate that it would be a high total. But when you look at the game logs, look at the box scores, Providence can get caught in some high-scoring games. And oh, by the way, UConn won the original matchup between these two teams earlier in the season, 87-84. In that game, Hassan Diarra had 19 points, 8 assists. Jaden Pierre for Providence had 24. Yeah, kind of a shootout out of nowhere. That's 171 points. And like I said, these two profiles don't really lend themselves to like high game totals. UConn ranks 328th in tempo and 113th in defensive efficiency. They foul a lot. They give up a lot of threes. Providence ranks 224th in tempo, 129th in defensive efficiency. They do not force a lot of turnovers, but 5 out of their last 6 opponents have scored 80. So Providence is a team that's really been caught in some shootouts as of late. And if that continues, then you got to feel like some of these UConn guys are going to be worth targeting. And personally, I think this line is a little bit soft on UConn. I would personally have thought UConn would have been like 5 or 6 point favorites, as opposed to KenPom having them projected to only win by 2. Anyway, let's talk about that UConn side. So Liam McNeely is now the price king for UConn. He appears to be this team's best offensive player going forward. Like, I don't think that that's really up for debate at this point anymore. He's playing all of the minutes, at least 35 minutes in the last 5 games. He's taking double-digit shots in all those games. Now, the problem is that I don't really like paying all the way up for scoring-dependent guys on DraftKings. If he was a little bit more consistent of a rebounder or consistent of an assist guy, I think you could make a compelling argument to play him. But looking at his price tag, $8,100, there's only one game in the last 5 where he hit 4x value for that price tag, and that was when he put up 57 DraftKings points against Creighton. So yes, the ceiling is there. The consistency's there, but like, I just think he's a little overpriced for a guy that is very scoring dependent. And I don't really get down with playing guys that are scoring dependent above $8,000 on DraftKings. Now, Solo Ball is also having himself a run recently. He's only $7,300. He's taken at least 13 shots in the last 5 games. That's quite an impressive streak. If you think that this game ends up shooting out, it's quite likely that he's going to put up a lot of DraftKings points, but I would rather play his backcourt mate. I would rather play Hassan Diarra. We're far from the days of Diarra as a free square when he was 4,700 against Seton Hall. But, in the 4 games since then, he's put up 26, 21, 30, 32. Pretty much all of those would have been good performances at $6,700. So I'm still willing to play him. I'm willing to go back to that well. And he has a massive assist rate. So if you think that UConn scores more points than 75 in this one, which I do, then it makes sense to play Diarra as a little bit of a stacking partner, knowing that he can get you points and assists. Also, Providence has been big time gotten by some big men recently. And if anybody on UConn were to take advantage of that, it would be Terrace Reed, who has been really good in the last 3 games, 30, 26, and 39 DraftKings points. He is a great fantasy point per minute player who doesn't always play the most minutes, and he's played 20 minutes in each of the last 3. I think if that continues, it's very, very likely that he gets you 4x or maybe even 5x value. And so Terrace Reed is going to be a guy that I'm probably going to have in my player pool. I've mentioned here on the podcast before, but I don't play cash games. I only play GPPs. And Terrace Reed is the type of guy that can win you a GPP. And if you play GPPs, he needs to be in your player pool because he does have that upside and he's a great fantasy point per minute option. Now, on the Providence side, it's interesting. This has been kind of a frustrating team to target all season long because they have so many injuries, so many guys coming in and out of the lineup, so many guys that just randomly pop off for big games. You never really know what to expect from him. Bensley Joseph, $7,900, has been kind of their guy recently until he wasn't. Against Marquette, he only played 18 minutes, only put up 9.75 DraftKings points. Now, the devil's advocate would say, hey, like they lost that game by 30. There was no reason to play him. That game was not competitive. It was not close. So maybe that's the outlier game, or maybe it's a sign of things to come. I don't know. If you think it's the outlier, then go back to him. If you don't play him. Just quite simple. Jaden Pierre, though, has been a little more consistent, but he hasn't quite shown the ceiling that Bensley Joseph has, but he's also not at the price that Bensley Joseph is. But Jaden Pierre is a guy that's getting double-digit shots, has a big assist rate. So if you think that this game ends up shooting out like the last one did, then Jaden Pierre could be a very viable option as a stacking partner at 7,100. The most interesting piece to me for Providence is Corey Floyd Jr. This guy was playing great before his injury. I believe he got in a car accident. Like, don't quote me on that, but I think that was the injury that actually happened. Like, I don't think it was from a game. And he missed like 3 or 4 games, and now he's back. He played full minutes against Marquette. He was 0 for 5 from the field. He was awful in the game, but he's back to playing full minutes. If he comes back to his role, $6,500 price tag is not bad for the guy, considering he was putting up 30 DraftKings points on a nightly basis before his injury. So if he ends up being fully back, I don't mind Corey Floyd at $6,500. All right, that's going to do it for game number 4. All right, game number 5, another battle in the Big East coming up. This is a very Big East heavy slate we've got here. We've got Butler taking on Villanova. If there's anybody in this game that you guys like, let me know in the comments, because I'll be honest, I could see myself full fading this game. I'm going to talk about a few guys, but I could see myself full fading this Butler Villanova game. If there's anybody you guys like, like I said, let me know in the comments. I'm curious if you guys have a higher opinion on this game than I do. As it stands right now, KenPom has Villanova projected to win 77-71. That is a 148-point total. This game is a rematch. In the previous meeting, Villanova won 73-65. That is 138 points, which is 10 lower than KenPom's projection for this one. In that game, Eric Dixon absolutely dominated. He scored 28 points. And then Wooga Poplar had 18 points, 15 boards. Massive stat line for Wooga in that game. And Jamil Telfort had 25 and 10 in that game. So the stars on both sides really went off in that original meeting. But with the fact that it only had 138 total points scored, those are really the only guys that were DraftKings viable in that game. Now, let's go ahead and talk about Butler. So the aforementioned Jamil Telfort is their most expensive player. He is their best player. He's their usage leader on the season. I think he's a little overpriced at $8,000. That's just my personal opinion on it. Like, you look at the last 5, you've got 23 and 27, which would have been duds. You got 33 and 33, which would have been okay, right? At $8,000, we'll take 33. That's 4x value. And then one game of 42, which would have been really good. But that game was also against Providence. Like we said, Providence has kind of been a sieve inside recently. So Jamil Telfort, I don't know what to make of him. If he was $7,000, I think he'd be a great play. $8,000, it's tough to make an argument for him. But the fact that he did have success against Villanova in the last meeting, I could see the argument for playing him. I could. The only other Butler guy that I really, really like is Bowden Kapke. He has been moved into the starting lineup at the center position. He's only $3,900, and in 2 of the last 3 games, he's put up over 19 DraftKings points. Now, he can be big-time hit or miss, because there's some misses, but $3,900 for a guy who's starting, and guy who definitely has upside for 5x or 6x value. I think there's far worse plays on the slate, and I think he's actually, on paper, one of the better plays below $4,000 on the slate. All right, now let's talk about the Villanova side. So for Villanova, Eric Dixon dominated that first game against Butler, right? Scoring 28 points. From a DraftKings perspective, ended up with 40 that game. He's $9,500, so we'll take 40. In the last game, he played against Seton Hall. put up 50 DraftKings points, right? Like he has the potential to do that. And to me, here's the best argument for playing Eric Dixon. It's going to have to do with a guy that's in the next game we're going to talk about. Everybody's going to play that guy. No one's going to play the guy's price right below him. One of them is Eric Dixon. So I absolutely think that Dixon, you could view him as a GPP pivot off of what is going to be expected chalk at the very top at the forward position. And Dixon is a guy who could absolutely give you a massive performance because he's done it before. He's just an elite scorer. He's leading the Big East in scoring this year. And he's a really good player. And it's not like Butler is some elite interior defense. So I could see the argument for playing Dixon from a game theory perspective more so than an actual numbers perspective. Wooga Poplar had that incredible game against Butler the first time. But now, much like kind of Jamil Telford on the other side, I just view him as being overpriced. So I just don't really – I just can't play the guy at $9,100. I just can't. I think there's other guys I'd rather play at a cheaper price tag. And then, honestly – From there, Villanova really plays a six-man rotation. Brickus, Longino, Perkins, and Bokier. They're guys that are going to play. Perkins had been really good, but he kind of fell off a cliff recently. Bokier randomly has these big games, but hasn't had one recently. So I don't know, man. Like I struggle to find somebody to play in this game. And like I said, I think I might have a little bit of exposure to Telford and Kapke, a little bit of exposure to Dixon, and that's it for me from this game. All right, so we have reached the halfway point, 5 games out of 10. Some of you guys probably see what's about to happen next. We're about to talk about the most anticipated game of the day. If you are watching us live, please help me out. Do me a huge favor. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of the college basketball season. We're over 900 now, and I would love to get to 1,000 before March Madness ends. 9,000 would be incredible. Just help me out. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you're enjoying watching this here with us on a Friday night, hit the like button. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that, and I cannot stress it enough how much I appreciate it. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the biggest game of the day. All right, and looking at the chat, Darren, still with us. He has absolutely hit the nail on the head. If you don't click Broom and he has a 60-point game, how do you compete with that? It's like if you didn't play Knapp in Thursday Showdown Golf. That's a great metaphor because Jake Knapp with his 59 on Thursday out of nowhere, 4 shots clear of everybody. You pretty much had to have Jake Knapp in Showdown if you wanted to cash, because he was just that far and away above everybody else. Broom absolutely has the potential to be that far above and away everybody else. And he does that on the regular, right? Like Janai Broom, 60 DraftKings points against Georgia, 53 against Bama. It's not abnormal for him to put up these massive totals. So to me, Janai Broom is a guy that if you're playing enough lineups, you have to get in your player pool. And if you're playing one lineup, I could see the argument for just saying, hey, I'm going to play Broom and I'm going to make the rest of this work. Now, why is Broom such a big topic of conversation and such a big player in this game? Well, let's talk about the game environment itself, because I kind of skipped over that part. KenPom has this game projected to be 86-81 in favor of Auburn. This is the only game on the slate where both teams are projected to score over 80 points. Total of 167 is tied for the highest on the slate with the UNC Miami game. And both of these teams are going to get up and down. Both these teams are going to score a lot of points. Auburn ranks 125th in tempo and 12th in defensive efficiency. They're the number 1 offensively efficient team in the nation. Kentucky ranks 36th in tempo and 61st in defensive efficiency, and they're the number 6 offensively efficient team in the nation. So you have 2 great offenses against 2 tempos that are going to get up and down. This is just a formula for a lot of DraftKings points. And so like I was saying, Janai Broom, he's up there at $11,000. You only need 44 to consider it a win from him. And I think it's more likely than not that he gets 54 than 44. I just think that $11,000, I think he's a great play. I think he's going to be highly owned, but I think that if you're playing a lot of lineups, you got to get some exposure to him. You just got to. And like I said, the only other argument for not playing him would be the game theory angle of saying, hey, what if I fade Broom and he doesn't go off, and then I'm able to gain ground by playing a guy like Eric Dixon? That very well could happen, but you kind of got to ask yourself, what's most likely to happen? And I think what's most likely to happen is Broom puts up about 50 DraftKings points. Now, would he absolutely break the slate if he got 50? No. But would he be a guy that you'd like to have in your lineup if you got 50? Yeah. If you told me right now that Broom was going to score 50, guarantee it, well, then I would put him in my lineups. And that's what I think the most likely outcome is. So I am going to be playing a lot of Janai Broom. All right, as I'm talking about the rest of the guys in this game, let me know in the chat. What are you guys doing with Janai Broom? Are you locking him in every lineup? Are you fading him? Are you 50-50ing? Are you playing him in one lineup, playing him in three lineups? Whatever you guys are doing, whatever you guys are thinking, let me know. I want to talk about it because I think this is the defining question of the slate is what are we going to do with Janai Broom? All right, now let's talk about the rest of the Auburn side. So Chad Baker-Mazara is interesting because he's kind of been like battling injuries, but like he's been playing in the games, but he shows up questionable on all the injury reports. I kind of don't know what to make of him. He's a super volatile profile anyway. He's very scoring dependent, doesn't give a whole lot of peripheral stats. He's probably not for me on this slate, even though with Auburn projected to score 86 points, it is quite likely he's going to give you a good scoring game, but I don't know. I really struggle with a guy that's, constantly questionable and, scoring dependent. I just struggle with that. Miles Kelly's down here at $6,200. Speaking of scoring dependent, Miles Kelly's quite scoring dependent, but what the difference is with Miles Kelly and Baker-Mazara is Miles Kelly is a knockdown shooter. And when he makes his threes, you want him in your lineups. And looking at what he's done recently, 4 straight games over 22 DraftKings points. That's not bad at his price tag of $6,200. And if he knocks down 4 or 5 threes in this game, then that's instantly going to put him at value and you're going to want him in your lineups. And so I think he makes a lot of sense as like a stacking partner on the Auburn side or just in a general game stack. The other guy I want to talk about is Dylan Cardwell. He is Auburn's big man. That's not Janai Broom. Janai Broom plays a little bit at the 4, which some people might not realize. Dylan Cardwell plays the 5 when he's in. Cardwell is not a super high usage player. He's not a super productive player. But it's because he doesn't play a lot of minutes. He's a pretty good fantasy point per minute player. And oh, by the way, Kentucky is really, really soft on the interior defensively. So I kind of could see an argument for playing Dylan Cardwell here on this slate at $4,700. I think you could play him with Broom. I think you could play him instead of Broom. I think that it makes a lot of sense to play him because if he does end up playing 25 minutes in this game, I think it's very likely that he ends up smashing with the tempo and the defensive weaknesses that Kentucky does have. The other guy I'm going to talk about is Denver Jones. So Denver Jones has been pretty solid for Auburn recently. Just kind of like a solid player, not really exploding for any big games or anything like that. But what we've seen is that the shot attempts have been pretty consistent. He's taken between 8 and 10 shots in each of the last 5 games. He can get you some assist upside as well. So I think he makes for a pretty reasonable stacking partner at $4,700. You're going to get a guy who's going to probably play 30 plus minutes and probably get you 18 DraftKings points. And at $4,700, I think that's a very reasonable price tag for Denver Jones. Now, let's talk about the Kentucky side. So Kentucky has been a bit of a mess recently. What's new is that they have declared Jackson Robinson out. That must have came out pretty recently because I did not see that when I was doing my research. But what that does is that does clear up some minutes and usage for a lot of the other guys. He has missed the last few games. But he played Wednesday against Oklahoma, only played 12 minutes, didn't look all that great. So no shocker to see him listed as out. What I think that's going to do is I think that's going to boost up Kobe Brea. He had been kind of the big beneficiary of the Jackson Robinson minutes. Kobe Brea, one of the best catch and shoot 3-point shooters in the nation. And what I want you to do, if you haven't already, go look back at Kobe Brea's game log. Look at his 3 points at home. 3 for 4 Vanderbilt, 3 for 6 Tennessee, 2 for 6 South Carolina, 1 for 6 Arkansas, 2 for 3 Bama, 1 for 5 A&M, 7 for 9 Florida. Like, this guy has a history of hitting 3-point shots in his home arena. Going back to his Dayton days, he was the same way. He was a much better shooter at home than on the road. So Kobe Brea, $5,700. If he knocks down 4 or 5 threes, he's going to give you value. I think it makes a lot of sense to play him if you're playing GPPs. He hasn't really had like any explosion games recently, but he's playing a ton of minutes without Jackson Robinson in the lineup, and he takes a ton of threes. So definitely think he's interesting at $5,700. Otega-Oweh had like the revenge game against Oklahoma because he had previously transferred from Oklahoma. 32 minutes, 38 DraftKings points. I don't think that's super likely here in this game. He took 21 shots and only 3 of them were threes, so he took 18 shots from 2-point range. Auburn's interior defense is much better than Oklahoma's. More on that later. So I definitely think that this is not the spot to go back to Otega-Oweh, just my personal opinion. I think the other guy I'm a little interested in is Lamont Butler. So he returned from an injury as well in the Oklahoma game. He was in the starting lineup. He only played 20 minutes, but he put up 21.5 DraftKings points in 20 minutes. That's a really good fantasy point per minute rate for a guard. And if you told me right now that he was going to play 30 minutes, I'd have him in my lineups. Like, I don't know to the extent of his injury. I know that he was good enough to play last game, but like, could he have played more than 20 minutes if he stayed out of foul trouble? Possibly. I don't know. But if he plays 30 minutes in this game, I think that $6,300 is a super reasonable price tag. And I think that you could really stack up this game by going with Broome and one of the cheap Auburn guards, and then Butler or Brea on the Kentucky side. You can really, in a cost-effective way, get a lot of exposure to this game, in my opinion. Now, for the Kentucky bigs, Williams, Carr, and Garrison, I'm just not all that interested going up against Auburn. Auburn's a really good defensive front court. Williams is seeing less and less usage now that Butler is back, and they're kind of playing a little bit more through Oweh as well. So I have a hard time advocating for it. I'm probably going to stick to Broome and the guards here in this one. And yeah, Darren in the chat, hitting the nail on the head. Darren's had some really good insight tonight. He said, definitely think it's going to be chalky stacking this game. I 100% agree. He says, like I've heard you say before, it's good chalk. Yeah, like I think that, asking yourself what's most likely to happen, right? And I think it's quite likely that this game is going to end up going north of 160 points. And if that's the case, then you're going to want some pieces from this game. And so I don't think that it's going to be that difficult to get 2, 3, 4 pieces from that Auburn-Kentucky game in your DraftKings lineup. All right. Spent a lot of time on that one. But that's okay, because the next few are going to go quicker because they're not as interesting. Next up, we've got Arkansas taking on South Carolina. KenPom has this one projected to be 69-68 in favor of Arkansas. In terms of stats, Arkansas ranks 90th in tempo and 20th in defensive efficiency. South Carolina ranks 281st in tempo and 55th in defensive efficiency. South Carolina also gets a lot of shots blocked, and they are a very poor three-point defense. They rank outside the top 300 in defensive three-point percentage. So let's talk about the Arkansas side, because they got a big injury that happened. Adu Thero, I've heard it pronounced now, Thero. He is out for this game. He missed the Texas game. So we do have a game sample size to go off of for what they're going to do with their rotation and their usage. And what they did in that Texas game was, instead of trying to find another guard or a wing to replace Thero, they went big. They went real big. So for some reason, Calipari hates playing Big Z Zvonimir Ivisic over 30 minutes. He only played him 26 against Texas, 33 DraftKings points. High usage player without Thero in the lineup for sure. Big block upside against this South Carolina team. Love Ivisic at $9,000. I think he's another, like Eric Dixon, a good GPP pivot off of Janai Broome. And then Trayvon Brazile played at the 4 in Thero's spot, 40 minutes against Texas, 27.5 DraftKings points. He's only $3,700. This is the value play of the slate right here. This is the value play that everybody's going to play because of what he did in the Texas game, because Thero is out. And he's going to be in a lot of my lineups. He's probably going to be in a lot of other people's lineups as well. But it's just, there's not a whole lot of obvious value on this slate. With Thero out, this is a guy that you can project for 30-plus minutes for 20 DraftKings points at a salary of $3,700. I think he's a great play. And then they also played Jonas Adu a lot more as well. Like I said, they didn't really look to replace Thero with guards or wings. They replaced Thero with bigs. And Adu played 23 minutes against Texas, put up 21.5 DraftKings points. If you are worried about Brazile chalk, play Adu. I don't think people are going to play Adu because he's 100 more expensive, and he didn't have as great of a game against Texas, but 21 DraftKings points at $3,800. I would take that. Billy Richmond also played a decent amount off the bench, 21 minutes in that Texas game, 13.75 fantasy points. I played him a ton on the DraftKings late night slate, in that Texas game, because I thought he was going to replace a lot of Thero's production. Not as much as I thought. I thought he'd give us more than this, but 21 minutes is more than as usual. I could see the argument for playing him here in this game. And then Carter Knox also played a ton of minutes in that Texas game, 41 minutes, 17.5 DraftKings points. Now, let's talk about the usage eaters, right? Because with Thero out, there was like a vacuum of usage. Not a lot of it went to Jonell Davis. I thought it would. Davis only took 9 shots in the Texas game, only put up 21 DraftKings points, but I could see him having a bounce back game in this one. But the guy that had all the usage in the Texas game was DJ Wagner. Played 39 minutes, took 14 shots, 28.5 DraftKings points, 5 assists in that game. I think he makes a ton of sense if you're looking to stack up this Arkansas side and play multiple pieces from it. I think it makes a ton of sense to play DJ Wagner, especially if you're playing Brazil or Adu, and you know that Wagner's going to be getting assists to one of them. I think that it does make a decent amount of sense to play 1 or 2 Arkansas guys in this one, even though they're only projected for 69 points on KenPom. Just the usage vacuum created by Thero being out, I think is really going to elevate a lot of guys' scores on DraftKings. Now, let's talk about the Arkansas side. I'm sorry. Let's talk about the South Carolina side. Arkansas is not a good matchup, y'all. 20th in the nation in defensive efficiency. It's not a team that's surrendering a lot of points right now. And so to me, South Carolina, they're a team that I think you can full fade. Colin Murray-Boyles has been great this season for them. Pretty much night in, night out. He's been pretty solidly between 37 and 45 DraftKings points, like pretty darn consistently. If you want to go for it, knock yourself out. I think Eric Dixon has a little more upside. I think Big Z has a little more upside. And I think Janai Broome at $1,300 more expensive has a lot higher floor and more upside. So I just think he's going to get lost in the shuffle among the top plays on the slate. And so sometimes if nobody's playing a guy, it makes him a good play. So I could see the argument for Colin Murray-Boyles. If you want to do that, you can. I'm probably not going to, though. Jamari Thomas has been interesting. Since he's came back from injury, he's really been a more high usage player for South Carolina than he was prior to his injury. He's been great, but like I said, Arkansas is a tough matchup. They have a lot of rim protection. I'm not really buying Jamari Thomas. The one kind of good piece of information if you're going to target this South Carolina team is that Miles Studi is remaining out. And so Davis, Wright, and Ugasuk are going to continue to kind of see minutes in Studi's stead. Arden Conyers has kind of fallen off a little bit. But like I said, I think you can full fade this South Carolina team and be none the wiser. All right, now, game number 8. This is a game that I think is worth targeting, a game that I think is worth talking about. Oklahoma taking on Ole Miss. Big reason why Oklahoma doesn't have a lot of size, doesn't have a lot of interior presence defensively. So I think that this is a matchup that you can exploit. And I think that Ole Miss has a few guys that can exploit it. Let's talk about the stats, though. So KenPom has this one projected to be 79-72 in favor of the Running Rebels. Are they the Running Rebels or are they just the Rebels? Maybe they're just the Rebels. Yeah. Anyway, Ole Miss projected to win 79-72. That is a game total of 151 points. In terms of the stats, Oklahoma ranks 111th in tempo and 68th in defensive efficiency. They are a very poor rebounding team. They are a very poor interior defense. Ole Miss, on the other hand, ranks 137th in tempo and 21st in defensive efficiency. That's how Chris Beard likes it. They're a poor rebounding team, but they're a lot better defensively, especially on a per possession basis. They block a lot of shots and they force opponents to take a lot of threes. That's kind of Chris Beard defensive principles. We're going to protect the rim. We're going to make you take perimeter jump shots. So on the Oklahoma side, who can exploit that? Well, Jeremiah Fierce has been their best player in the last 3 games. 33, 53, 37 DraftKings points. He's been great. I played a lot of him last week against Mississippi State, and I was paid off for that when he put up 53.25. Look, you look at this Oklahoma team, and you're trying to figure out where the scoring is going to come from. It's got to come from Fierce. He's the guy that's taken all the shots. He's been the most effective player offensively for them. His price tag has ballooned to $9,300, but I kind of see the merit in playing him. I do. I'm kind of going to say the same thing I said about a few other guys. I would rather pay up for Broome, but I think he makes for a very viable GPP pivot, especially if you want a stack of this game, because I think this game is kind of stackable. For the rest of the Oklahoma side, Jalen Moore, I think he's just a little overpriced. $7,700. If he were $6,700, I'd be all over him. Sam Godwin has been playing really well recently. he's playing more and more minutes because this team just doesn't have a lot of size, and they don't have a lot of size after him. So I think he's going to have to play a lot of minutes, and I think $4,900, I think he makes a lot of sense as a value play. But I probably wouldn't play him if I was playing one of the Ole Miss bigs on the other side, because I think if you're playing one of the Ole Miss bigs, they're probably going to be getting him in foul trouble if they're succeeding. So probably wouldn't play both of them in the same lineup. But other than that, we've kind of seen a falling off for a lot of these other Oklahoma guys. Duke Miles and Kobe Elvis were mid-major transfers who were playing very well at the start of the season for this Oklahoma team. They've kind of taken a backseat recently to Fierce. So I'm not really all that interested in playing them. Now, Bryson Goodine is a guy that I'll mention. So I'm going to go on record. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but I'm saying this wouldn't shock me. It would not shock me if Bryson Goodine was on the winning GPP roster tomorrow. I'm not saying he's going to be. I'm saying it wouldn't shock me, because this is a guy who all he does is show up and shoot threes, and Ole Miss is a team that's going to force you to shoot a lot of threes. And so he randomly has these games where he can just hit 5 threes, like he did against Texas A&M when he put up 31 DraftKings points, or when he hit 9 threes against Texas A&M, put up 48 DraftKings points. Wow, Texas A&M learned how to defend the three-point line. But so yeah, if he shows up and he takes 10 threes and he hits 5 of them, he's going to be in the winning GPP lineup. So I'm going to be taking a few shots at him. I think he might be a little bit under the radar compared to a lot of the other value plays we talked about on this slate, but this is a guy that I'm going to be having in my player pool. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think that there's a chance that he could give you a winning GPP score. Now, let's talk about the Ole Miss side. So like I said, Ole Miss has guys that can take advantage of that Oklahoma weak interior defense. But first off, we got to address this. Matthew Murrell is listed as probable for this game. I feel like this guy always has a Q tag and always plays. But he's listed as probable for this game. If he does not play, then that would open up more minutes for Murray and Barnes, as well as a little bit of Dre Davis as well. But the main guy for Ole Miss that I'm going to be targeting is Malik Dia. He is their starting center. He is a great fantasy point per minute player. He doesn't always play a ton of minutes, but in games where he is effective, Chris Beard's like, you know what? This guy's doing well. I'm going to leave him in there. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. And against some of the better matchups in the SEC, he's done pretty well. Missouri, kind of a small team, 26 minutes, 34 DraftKings points. Kentucky, really poor interior defensively, 24 minutes, 28 DraftKings points. Vanderbilt, very small team, 31 minutes, 38 DraftKings points. You guys see where I'm going with this, right? Oklahoma, very small team, very poor interior defense. Malik Dia could absolutely have a smash game here in this one as well. Now, if you're looking to stack up this Mississippi side, Sean Padu will be your A1 stacking partner because he has a very high assist rate. He is very adept at getting into the paint and creating for others as well as himself. $7,800, I would prefer to see him a little cheaper, but I don't think it's unreasonable. If you're looking to stack this game up, he would be a guy that I would be getting into my lineups. And then lastly, we mentioned he might really see an uptick if Morrell is out, but Dre Davis is like really a slasher. He's going to be driving it into the paint, and we've talked about how Oklahoma can't defend the paint. So I think Dre Davis makes a little bit of sense as well at $6,100. He just has a super volatile profile. He can be boom or bust, but recently he's shown kind of a high floor. Hasn't been under 18 DraftKings points in 6 straight, which wouldn't kill you. You're not going to win a GPP with him at 18, but it wouldn't kill you. You can still cash with that. So, I'm definitely going to be getting some exposure to this Ole Miss side with Oklahoma having that weak interior defense. Next up, we've got Texas Tech taking on Kansas, battling the Big 12. Ken Pom has this one projected to be Kansas 72-71 for a total of 143 points. And it's not hard to see why. These are two really good defensive teams that don't play all that fast. I don't think that this is a game you're going to want to be going out of your way to target. Texas Tech ranks 273rd in tempo and 27th in defensive efficiency, whereas Kansas ranks 109th in tempo and 5th in defensive efficiency. So the most interesting part of this game to me is kind of all the injuries that you might get with Texas Tech. Because right now, Darion Williams and Chance McMillian, they both missed last game for Texas Tech. And what they did was, even in a game that was not super close down the stretch, they kind of played 6 guys. And that kind of makes them all appealing. So if Texas Tech does have Williams and McMillan out for this game, their rotation was Christian Anderson, Elijah Hawkins, JT Toppin, Kevin Overton, and Kerwin Walton and Federico. That's it. That's the only guys they played. So if you think that McMillian and Williams missed this game, it's kind of easy to get to Overton and Walton and Federico as cheap plays because they're going to play a ton of minutes. And anytime you can get a guy in the 3K range that's going to play a ton of minutes, you got to be all over it, right? Now, obviously, if those two guys are back, I think that creates a situation where you don't want to go to those three guys. But as of right now, we don't really know what's going to happen. And if they're out, then that really creates some value. And it really kind of elevates Toppin, Hawkins, and Anderson as well. But I think the matchup against Kansas kind of tempers expectation for the high dollar plays on Texas Tech. And I would be super interested in the low dollar plays if Williams and McMillan are out. Here's the problem, though. This is one of the last tips of the day. So if you plan on playing Overton, Walton, and Federico, you've got only the Oklahoma Ole Miss game and the Seton Hall St. John's game as backup options. And there's not really a whole lot of viable cheap plays in those games. So you're kind of stuck if we don't get injury news before lock on Williams and McMillan. If we don't get injury news before lock, you're kind of stuck with those guys in your lineup unless you really want to try something really, really greasy. However, Kansas has a guy that might work, though. So Kansas is a team that I generally haven't been targeting a whole lot just because they're just super weird to target in DFS now. Like you got Hunter Dickinson, but he's not he hasn't been this supremely high usage player until the Colorado game. He hasn't played a ton of minutes in a game until the Colorado game because Kansas had been playing some blowouts. And then you've got Zeke Mayo, who has just not been worth his price tag recently. And then you've got DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams, who, A, it feels like they've been there forever, but B, I never play them in DFS because they're players that don't shoot the basketball a whole lot. And last time I checked, it's hard to score DraftKings points when you're not shooting the basketball. So I never play the two of them. Flory Badunga is now back to the bench now that KJ Adams is back, so he's not interesting to me. But here's the value play you can get to on canvas. Rylan Griffin. He was into the starting lineup when Shaquille Moore was injured against Colorado, played 32 minutes, only took 5 shots, but put up 23 DraftKings points. This is a guy that could really fill it up when he was at Alabama, could really fill up his stat sheet, was much more than a $4,000 player. And so if he's going to continue to start, he's going to continue to get minutes. He's a value play that I absolutely could see myself getting to at $3,900. And he makes it so that way, if you are playing these Texas Tech guys, Overton, Walton, or Federico, if you're playing Overton, then you could just swap him right over to Rylan Griffin. If you're playing Walton or Federico, you would need an extra $400 salary. But to me, he kind of makes that strategy of late swapping work if you're looking to play those cheap Texas Tech guys. Yeah, see, Darren in the chat says if no Williams, Fede times 2 is nice. Yeah, Federico. Yeah, if Williams is out, they have no other bigs with Yalaho hurt. So Federico's going to play 30 minutes. $3,500. He's going to have to stay out of foul trouble against Hunter Dickinson, but he's going to play a ton of minutes. And there's just not a whole lot of cheap forwards on this slate. So he's definitely in play if we get Williams and McMillan out. All right, now, last game of the day. Battle in the Big East, where St. John's could claim an outright regular season Big East championship with a win in this game. Ken Pom thinks they're going to do it. Ken Pom has this game projected to be 75-53. That is bad. That is so bad. That's a game total of 128 points. Seton Hall with a projection of 53 is the lowest on the slate by 15 points. Yeah, that's ugly. And this is a rematch. These two teams played earlier in the season, and St. John's won 79-51. So they're projecting them to score 2 more points than they scored in the first meeting. Yikes. In that game, RJ Lewis had 24, 8, and 4. Isaiah Coleman led Seton Hall with 11 points. Nobody on Seton Hall was DFS viable in that game. In general, the stats dictate that this is just not a game you're going to want to target. Seton Hall, even though they're not good, they're 333rd in tempo, and they're 86th in defensive efficiency. They force a lot of turnovers, but they're really poor field goal defense, and St. John's doesn't turn it over a whole lot anyway. Seton Hall's also outside the top 300 in offensive efficiency. That's bad. That's really bad. St. John's ranked 61st in tempo and 2nd in the nation behind only Duke in defensive efficiency, but they're a really poor 3-point shooting team. So they're scoring their way 2 points at a time. So you're not going to see a lot of points scored in this one, y'all. You can totally cross it off if you want. From the Seton Hall side, Chauncey Jenkins and Scotty Middleton are questionable. The only guy that there's 2 guys that I'm considering. First is Dylan Adewusu. I played him on the Wednesday slate against Villanova, and I was rewarded for it. He put up 40 DraftKings points. Now, he wasn't a core play. He wasn't a guy that I had in all of my lines or anything like that, but I had him in my player pool, and I'm going to have him in my player pool again. They just don't have a lot of guys on this team that are going to shoot the ball. And they don't have a lot of guys on this team that are going to put up peripheral stats. And he checks off both boxes. Remember from his days at St. John's, he was a much higher priced player on DraftKings. So I'm kind of willing to buy this Dylan Adewusu. I don't think he's going to get 40 again. But if he gets me 25, 26, I'm going to be content with that at $5,800. So Dylan Adewusu is going to make my player pool. Prince Alibe has a little bit of interest for me as well. Call it chasing the Villanova game because he did have 28 DraftKings points in that one, but he plays all the minutes if he stays out of foul trouble. He's a great rebounder. $4,400, there's not a whole lot of cheap options out there at the forward spot. So I just think that Adewusu and Alibe, they're going to make my player pool. Nobody else will. And I'm going to leave it at that. On the St. John's side, they're tough to target because of the fact that, like, this is not a super juicy matchup. Seton Hall's going to slow this game down. Like, they're not going to score a ton of points. Now, RJ Lewis is back from his injury. He's doing RJ Lewis things again. I don't mind the idea of playing him just because he's a guy who can fill up a stat sheet, but $9,400. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'd rather pay up for Broom. I think there's other better plays in the 9K range as well. Zuby Ejiofor does have my interest. This Seton Hall team has been victimized by big men, and Ejiofor has shown that when he stays out of foul trouble, he's going to play max minutes and he can give you a double-double. So I don't mind the idea of Ejiofor at 8,600. Aaron Scott is currently listed as questionable for this game. He apparently was hurt in the game against Butler, but he played 39 minutes. If he ends up missing, you got to feel like that's going to open up a little usage for Richmond, Lewis, and Smith. Wilcher's probably going to get a lot of his minutes. And Sadiko Abin Ayo might get a few minutes as well. If this game turns into a blowout, then Abin Ayo would be a guy that you could play in a GPP as a punt. And if it turns into a blowout, he might do something for you. But like I said, man, I'm just not super sold on this St. John side with Seton Hall playing so slow. But all right, that's going to do it for all 10 games. So we have been going for right around exactly an hour. So not bad timing, right? So hopefully we gave you guys all the information that you need to know about this Saturday slate. If you have not already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us through the rest of the college basketball season, including the NCAA tournament, including our video tomorrow night that's going to drop on Underdog's newest college basketball best ball format, because I think that knowing the strategy and knowing the right way to play that game can help you get maximum EV in that contest. And if you're not on Underdog, use my code. It's in the description. You can get your first deposit match, so basically double your money to use on this college basketball best ball contest, I should say. But yeah, that's going to do it for this slate. And I hope you guys will subscribe so that we can be with us for the rest of the season. If you have not already, please hit the like button as well. It helps me out a ton. I appreciate when you guys do that. If you're listening on audio after the fact, hopefully we're able to keep you guys informed, and please rate and review if you're listening on audio. But like I said, I was trying to keep it at an hour. I think I did a pretty good job of that. Thank you guys for joining us here on this hour live show. Darren, appreciate all the interaction in the chat. I really very much look forward to the comments and very happy to interact with them. But yeah, thank you guys for watching this. Hope you guys got the information you need to build some winning DFS lineups. Best of luck to you guys on the Saturday slate tomorrow. And I will see you guys next time. I'm going to go ahead and sign off.